Ready? Good morning. I'll call to order the May 11th, 2021 Board of Supervisors meeting. Please stand if you are able and join us in stating the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Due to the ongoing pandemic, we are continuing to social distance and provide access via Zoom, which is allowed under Code Section 21.8.1. With that, I will ask if there are any changes to the agenda, or if not, a motion to adopt today's agenda.
Move approval of today's agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Basil?
Aye.
Merkin?
Aye.
Heddens? Aye. Next one, we'll move on to public comment number 1. This is the comment period. It's for the public to address topics on today's agenda. If you'd like to make comments, please raise your hand if you're on Zoom, or click *9 to unmute yourself. We do have a couple people in the in the main public meeting room today. We've got some staff here. Waiting a few seconds to see. Let Leanne see if there's anyone raising their hand or unmuting. Not seeing anything? All right, we will then close public comment number 1. Next, we will move on to discussion and direction regarding the lease renewal with the Mary Greeley Medical Center. We've got Joby here, and I believe Carla's. I'm not sure if Carla's on. Yep, Carla's on there as well.
Good morning, board. So today we are here to discuss the lease renewal for 124 South Hazel, effective July 1 of this year. I believe Christy Kraus is on the line. So hopefully she'll have access to be able to speak. She's with Mary Greeley and Gary Botine as well. And then I think too, joining us is Russell Wood with CICS, and hopefully Joby is there in the meeting room. So right now the lease is at $1 per term of the lease, which started January 1 of this year. Currently, Mary Greeley is providing transitional living center services at this location. Mary Greeley and CICS, as you know, we've been working to develop subacute services. We'd like to have those implemented by July 1 of this year, as this is a required core service for regions that we need to have up and going by July 1. So the concept that is being developed is to have subacute services available with the option of transitional living center services for individuals who need some additional time for their discharge plan to come together. But recently, when I talked with Christy, that is something that they're going to look into when DIA license beds. And so she was going to look into whether or not they could still provide the transitional living center service there, or if we need to look at it as potentially like a step down subacute. We haven't had a lot of conversation around that, and I don't know if she'll have some additional information to share with us today or not. So that's still being worked through. But I thought today, if you had questions regarding service development and that, Christy could share that information, and then Joby as well can talk about the rent information that he's been able to pull together with the information that we have at this time. So I'll turn it back to you, Supervisor Heddens, if you would like to lead the discussion.
Sure. I know I have some questions, but I don't know if Joby wants to provide some additional information first, and then we open it up for questions.
I'd say we start with questions. I don't have anything to add besides what Carla did. You know, I think her memo kind of covers what my recommendation would be for a rent amount. So
I do have a question. The other group homes, is the square footage of them is less than the Hazel?
all the square footage, and
Okay, and what are we charging on those?
those we charge $12 a square foot annually, and then whatever the tax
What
is.
is that? Do you know about what that ends up being?
Okay, for total
Yeah.
monthly rent for the other All right, Calhoun is $5,405 a month, and Duluth is $5,423 a month.
Thanks.
And then for Hazel, we were charging $11 a square foot because at the Hazel Group Home where Mary Greeley's at, facilities management doesn't provide lawn care, which we do with the other two.
$49.75 equates to $11 a square foot a year.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, Carla, I guess I have a question, might be for you or maybe for Russell, in regards to reimbursement for the regional reimbursement for the year. I know that Mary Greeley's a nonprofit, and so I'm just trying to figure out how that factors in with the proposal here.
Sorry, Lisa, you were cutting out a little bit there. Could you repeat your question?
Yep, I noticed we were getting a little feedback. So I'm just seeking some clarification. I know that Mary Greeley is a nonprofit, so I'm just wondering how that enters into the figures that were here. And then also, my question is the reimbursement that Mary Greeley would get from the region, does that cover their costs for not only property tax, or at least for the rent? And I don't know if you would have that, or Russell, or what. That would be my initial question.
Yeah, I think what we were looking at was that whatever the costs were for Mary Greeley to provide this service, that we would build those costs into the contract that Carla would develop with Mary Greeley, and it would be reimbursable. We don't expect that Story County would absorb the costs of this program for subacute. So if it's the decision of the Story County Board to charge rent for that program, then we would just encourage Mary Greeley to build those costs into their cost report, and then we would negotiate the contract based on their costs.
This is Christy from Mary Greeley, and we would agree with the statement by Russell on behalf of the region. We would build the costs into the reimbursement rate.
Christy, it's Linda again, and I have a question then. The service would be effective, the subacute, July 1, but that doesn't mean you're going to be having it full. What's your capacity going to be for subacute?
So it's an 8-bed facility, and you're very right. We will have to ramp up that capacity, and that will take time. The other challenge we do have to get through licensure for the facility, and that is in progress right now. We are hoping to achieve that by July 1, but then we have to also go through an approval and accreditation process for both Medicaid MCOs in order to bill them for the service. So we will need some time there in order to get that in place, and unfortunately that can be several months to make that happen. We have had those discussions with the region about that delay, and they have been very supportive of, assisting us with the reimbursement until at which time we're successful in getting through that process with the MCOs.
As regions, we do understand that there will have to be braided funding with providers of these services. And so we'll work with Mary Greeley to get the program up and running until they do have the census necessary to help meet their needs. And even then, we'll still fund clients that are our clients that need to be funded. We've done this with other crisis or complex needs services that are provided by other providers.
Well, here's my concern. You're going to build in the rent into your new rate for subacute, but you will be collecting that money for a few months. And I'm assuming your rates for the other services don't give you any extra funds there to start paying this rent from July 1. Is that a fair estimation, or am I being too generous on that? Anybody?
I think we're in the process right now of looking at all of the rates for the services. I know that as Mary Greeley transitions to subacute, there will still be other, whether it's transitional living or step down subacute, whatever it ends up being called, that we will be looking at those rates as well and try to incorporate all of the costs that Mary Greeley has in those rates. So that's something Carla will be working on with Mary Greeley so that all of those necessary increases would come into play in July.
Okay, so all the rates effective July 1 would include some money to pay Stewart County the rent.
That's the intent. If you charge the rent, then we will adjust the rates to be able to cover that.
Thanks, appreciate that.
So I think my question is, and maybe you were asking that Supervisor Merkin, and I'm seeking further clarification. So if you're ramping up with I guess ramping up is not the appropriate word to use, but if you are not at capacity right away in July, maybe you won't be till December, for example. So are you saying your rate adjustments, I'm just trying to figure out, are we starting out where we're going to be running this at a total deficit right away for Mary Greeley, or how that compensation so that they're not running at a deficit right away? So will the rates be readjusted?
I think that what we would do, and Carla can chime in here as well, I think what we would do is look at a unit rate, and then we would offset, what we've done in a lot of cases is we would offset the units. So if Mary Greeley came up with a unit rate of $20, Christy, by the way, that's our hope. If they came up with a unit rate of $20 and they only had one person there, then we'd have those 7 other units, because they would be empty beds, that the region would cover as we get things moving forward. Carla, do you see that kind of an approach?
Yeah, I think something along those lines, definitely. Yeah. Right now, the subacute reimbursement rate set by Medicaid is $400 a day, I believe. And typically we try to follow the Medicaid rates. So I would anticipate we would probably have that rate in the contract, but then we'd have to figure out, how to make them whole, I guess, whether it's an access fee or something that is also paid. We'd have to figure that out. But yeah, our intent through CICS would be to make them whole with this. So.
But I'm still targeting the $20 rate, not the $400 rate.
Good luck,
I hear you laughing.
We're waiting for licensure and accreditation. Is it something that you're wanting to move and have this settled before July 1 with a rent amount? Or would it be better to stay with the dollar amount for a few months longer till that all falls into place? Or is that just too confusing? If that makes any sense at all?
I think it's up to you as a board if you want to start charging rent at this time, or if you would prefer to wait to see how things come together for the services and that. I think we can make it work either way, Lisa. So.
Yeah, I would say if you wanted to do something that had a motion that you would begin whatever you come up with as rent the month that they receive their licensure and accreditation, that's definitely an option. However, I think we as a region understand that right now you do have expenses in that you are not charging rent for that facility, but it is being used by Mary Greeley to provide services already to the region. So I would agree with Carla. If you feel that you want to start it on July 1, I think that would be fine with us. And we'll just make sure that it works. To Carla's point earlier about if the rate is $400, but there's an excess cost, that's where that braided funding would come in. And like I said, we have those kinds of things that we do with like our ACT team there in Ames. So that's just something that we do identify that's necessary.
I don't recall, because this has been a while since this has been before us, I was thinking our initial conversation on this was to basically charge or have Mary Greeley just cover the property tax costs, and stuff. And then we've got the rent on top of that, it sounds like. Is that, I mean,
We'd be paying the property taxes out of the rent we receive.
so, okay,
My
Well-
understanding, and maybe Joby, you can confirm, but my understanding is once the county starts charging rent, that's then when the county needs to pay the property taxes. So if you were gonna charge rent, I think before the discussion was at least making sure enough was charged to cover those property taxes.
And we also do have maintenance on the building
Yep.
now, and we
Yeah.
have staff, for.
Yes,
Yeah, so are charging up in amounts for comparable buildings. So I personally think it's time that we do start charging rent. I would be willing to wait until October 1st to charge the rent though. That would give a few months for things that are in process right now. I know you may not have the accreditation done, but you'll certainly have licensure and you'll be on your way to it. So I was thinking about making a motion that we start charging rent effective October 1st. And then
that is your motion.
I will move that,
If you don't want to make one yet, that's fine. I just wasn't sure if you were making a motion.
I'm considering that.
Gotcha, okay.
And
I didn't know if Christy or Gary had any other questions or anything anything else they wanted to end on. No, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. I am hopeful in response to Linda's intent on a motion there that by October 1st, things will be looking well. We'll be moving right along.
I do see a hand raised. Is that you, Christy? It says 38. It's 2011. Is that you or is that Gary?
It might be Gary. We're both on, I think.
No, he looks like he's muted still. Oh. Phone number is unmuted. I think it's 239-2011. I can't quite read it.
one at the top.
Right, so I just want to make sure. There. Gary, I think you're unmuted. Saw the hand raised, want to make sure I wasn't counting somebody out, so.
Are you ready for a motion?
Sure.
I would move that Story County begin charging rent to Mary Greeley Medical Center for the property at 124 South Hazel Avenue in the amount of $4,975 beginning October 1st.
I would second that.
Okay. Been moved in second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Merkin?
Aye.
Hazel? Aye. Evans? Aye. Okay, thank you. So Carla, you will be drafting up a contract or whatever, it's that you can look at that unit cost that will cover then that reimbursement rate.
I'll work with Christy and Russell on getting that all figured out and the contract developed. And then that contract will come back to the CICS governing board for approval. And then I'll work on the lease. I'll work with Ethan on drafting the lease to start 7/1 with, I guess a question I would have is typically we have $1 in that lease. So a question would be, should the lease be developed charging $1 between July and October 1, and then that monthly rent from October 1 on?
A minimal amount, so it's just up to Ethan, whatever, I'd say, whatever he thinks is best. I'd be fine with $1. I'd be fine with just saying that starts October 1.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm guessing we have to have something.
We have to have something, we can put it in.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration of a proclamation recognizing May 16th to the 22nd as Emergency Medical Services Week. Supervisor Merkin, do you want to start us off?
Certainly, this is the EMS with proclamation to designate the week of May 16th to 22nd, 2021 as Emergency Medical Services Week. Whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical services teams are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality medical care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services have grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine follow-up care and access to telemedicine. And
Whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-the-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And
Whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical service providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now therefore, we, the Story County Board of Supervisors, Story County, Iowa, in recognition of this event, do hereby proclaim the week of May 16 through 22, 2021 as Emergency Medical Services Week with the EMS strong theme, "This is EMS, caring for our communities." Move adoption of the proclamation, EMS Week proclamation.
it's been moved and seconded. Basil,
Aye.
Merkin,
aye.
Hens, aye. Proclamation is adopted. I know there are a couple of people from Mary Greeley that are also on for this proclamation, and would also like to encourage the public, if you're listening in during the week of May 16th through the 22nd, to do some outreach and any activities, appropriate activities to recognize the emergency medical personnel within your area. And thank you all for your service. Next, agency reports. We have NAMI Central Iowa's report. I think Angela Tharp is going to be on.
Not on yet.
Not on yet?
I don't see her in at least.
Okay. And I don't know if anyone else from NAMI Central Iowa was planning on being on, so I can't see all the names that are up there. Was there someone else from NAMI that was going to be on? If not, we can move on. And if they join, we can go back to it later. We did get their written report, so. Okay, not seeing anybody. We'll move on. There are no minutes to consider this week, so we'll move on. Consideration of personnel actions.
I move approval of personnel actions as listed.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Merkin,
Aye.
Basil,
Aye.
Hens, aye. Next is consideration of claims.
I move approval of claims as submitted.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Basil,
Aye.
Merkin,
Aye.
Hens, aye. We're up to consent agenda. Anything that anyone's pulling from consent agenda? Nope. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda as presented?
I move approval of consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Merkin,
Aye.
Basil,
Aye.
Hens, aye. We are down to public hearing items, and we have discussion and consideration of resolution 21-88, amending certain boundaries of the urban fringe plan and the land use map. Good morning, Amelia.
Good morning. I believe that also includes Resolution 21-89, which is an annexation request, just for clarification.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. I know it's a long title. Okay, I have a very short PowerPoint for you all this morning. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So this is the proposed annexation. We are in the Crestview Acres subdivision. So that's the county line road with Boone County, the north-south road, and Lincoln Highway is the east-west road. It's essentially this entire square area. The city of Ames is currently adjacent to both the north and the east. The annexation request is a unique request in that Flummerfelt Quail Ridge, which owns the majority of the property, and John Crane are consenting. Property owners, they've petitioned to voluntarily annex. And there is a 0.46 piece of land in the middle of the Flummerfelt property. I've highlighted in yellow. State law does not allow annexations to create islands. And so the city has to take in this piece of property involuntarily with the larger annexation. And then in the interest of creating more uniform boundaries, the city of Ames is also proposing to take in these three properties owned by Lamar Land Holdings, Brant Lamar, and Brian Adams along Lincoln Highway, which is also permitted under state code for voluntary annexations if the non-consenting properties don't comprise more than 20% of the annexation area, which is the case here. The annexation requires an Ames Urban Fringe Plan amendment. This, square is again the subject properties. There's three different designations. There's the urban residential designation on the north side. The south side is a highway-oriented commercial designation, and there's also a convenience commercial node here. And so what's interesting about this property is the urban residential area and convenience commercial node are both considered to be in this urban service area. Every urban fringe plan designation is part of one of three larger classes of land use. But the highway-oriented commercial is part of this larger rural urban transition area land use class. Again, it's completely surrounded by the urban service area and the city of Ames, but here we have a rural urban transition area, which means that we need an amendment to change this area in pink, the highway-oriented commercial area, to this brown color to make it an urban service area, because our 2080 agreement for the Ames Urban Fringe Plan requires that only annexations be completed when the property is designated urban service area. Are there any questions so far? I know that is complicated.
Nope, go ahead.
Great, thanks. So we have standards for when an amendment is required to our Ames Urban Fringe Plan. They're the same standards as our C2C plan amendment. I'll briefly go through these. They were in the staff report. Essentially, the first one is that we have to consider if this change is in accordance with our goals and policies for the comprehensive plan. And there's a specific policy in the Ames Urban Fringe Plan, policy 10 for the highway-oriented commercial area, that allows for that area to be designated urban service area, especially when there's a convenience commercial node on the property, which there is in this case. So that standard staff has concluded is met. We also have to find evidence demonstrating why this change is needed. Has something changed since the fringe plan was amended? And so with this standard, that policy that allowed highway-oriented commercial areas to be urban service area land use classes was adopted in 2016. So that's a new policy. I think we recognized a need for this policy. And so it was adopted. And since the plan's adoption, the Ames Urban Fringe Plan Amendment, the City Council for Ames has also undertaken this 2040 plan, looked at new growth scenarios for the city, and found this area to be a Tier 1 growth area. And while that plan's still in draft form, the council has taken action to direct staff to emphasize that they would prefer to grow into these tier 1 areas. And due to adjacent development, there are city sewer and water essentially stubbed almost adjacent to the site as well. So that's, staff has found enough evidence demonstrating that this area really should be in that urban service area designation now. We have another standard that is to look at whether or not the change is needed to allow reasonable development of the site. With this annexation, without the amendment, we couldn't support an annexation. It wouldn't be in conformance with the Ames Urban Fringe Plan. And so you'd have, annexed property to the north. But it would create, inefficiencies in how, water is extended along Lincoln Way. And just inefficiencies in terms of, how this property develops. We've got, the city developing around it, and then, the county, it would still be in the county, and the county would have, a joint jurisdiction over the property. So it's just not consistent with the development of the area to have this almost little island of rural urban transition area surrounded by the city of Ames and urban service area. So it is reasonable to amend this area to urban service area to match the adjacent properties. And we have another standard to look at supply and demand of land uses to make sure that, there isn't an oversupply or not a demand when we're amending the plan to allow a particular land use. This highway-oriented commercial area has specific policies in the Fringe Plan for how many households are to be served and what scale of commercial development is allowed. And so we've found this standard to be met. And the final standards have to do with, this standard has merit beyond the interests of just the applicant. Again, this is serving and benefiting a larger annexation area to be more efficient in terms of the provision of services. Similarly, we're to look at the possible impacts of the amendment on all areas of our comprehensive plan because this annexation is proposed. Most of the any fiscal impacts would be on the city of Ames, which is also the next standards, considering specifically the fiscal impacts of the proposed amendment on Story County. On this one, I will note there is a traffic study that will be required by the city to look at, expected developer financed improvements for this commercial node area. So we routed this request and sent notification out. The county engineer's office did note that half of this area is in a drainage district. And so when the area is developed, we need to maintain the existing patterns. So no new lands drain into the district. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard the request and did recommend approval of the amendment request. They don't take action on annexations though. And so they didn't hear the annexation request. That's also before you today. They did support that requirement for a traffic study, given the concerns about traffic at the intersection of North 500th and Lincoln Highway. So the city of Ames, again, will be requiring a traffic study for the development to make sure there are no improvements required, turn lanes, that kind of thing. There are concerns about flooding on the site and stormwater runoff. There has been flooding in the past. It's not in a designated floodplain, but related to just draining of, runoff when there's a large storm event. We did discuss at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting how the city of Ames has a stormwater management requirement, essentially requiring that runoff created by a development cannot be greater than what you'd see from a meadow, like a pre-settlement meadow in good condition. So that should help, not creating more downstream impacts with this development. We also had several members of the public who attended the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and provided comments, including the non-consenting property owners in the annexation, as well as the Justin Dodge with Hunsaker, who spoke on behalf of the consenting property owners. And so again, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the Ames Urban Fringe Plan Amendment. And staff is recommending approval of the annexation as well, which would be alternative 1. It's wordy, so I put the alternatives on a separate slide each, but basically we have approval. You could also do approval with conditions, which is the second alternative. The third alternative is denial, and the fourth would be remanding it for more information. I will just note in the packet you received, there's a large annexation plat, and that is attachment B on your resolution. I think it got mixed up in the scanning and it was the last page on the Agenda Center documents, but that's attachment B on the resolution. Are there any questions?
Supervisors, any questions?
You said that you quoted the Ames stormwater regulations. I would assume that they would mean that they would have to be, the developer would have to do some kind of stormwater retention on the site and similar to things that we have, and the water has to be held for a certain amount of time. So in fact, it might improve some of the drainage issues there.
Yes, that's what the applicant the Hunsaker communicated that at our Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. But yes, Ames has very similar stormwater management requirements to the county. We modeled our ordinance off of theirs, and they do require, retention and detention and treatment at a pretty high level.
Any additional questions at this time?
I don't think so.
Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand and we'll call on you to speak, or you hit *9 to unmute yourself on Zoom. If you're via phone, I think it's *5, *6. So if anyone would like to speak here at the public hearing, we'll wait a few seconds. Yep, I do see a hand that's gone up. Okay, please state your name. I see he's still muted. Is it Brant? Brant, I think you need to unmute yourself.
There, I was trying. Oh, hold on, I've got the test going as well here. There, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, apologize for that. Brant Lemire, 5333 Tabor Drive, Ames, Iowa, and also 5615 West Lincoln Way. In the middle of this annexation request. I apologize, I wasn't quite prepared today. I thought it was just an amendment. I just chimed in here to listen, and I thought it was just an amendment today. I read my notes wrong. It is an annexation as well, I see. So I apologize if I'm not too prepared here. But I just want to say that I'm not opposing the amendment to the annexation, the amendment part of the land use policy. I'm not opposing that, but I am opposing the annexation at this time. The reason I say at this time is because there's been I've been visiting with City of Ames for over a year now on this, and it kept, a lot of these questions couldn't be answered until the developer came with a plan. And I respected that. I said, okay, that's fine. We'll just wait till the plan. Well, here this March, the annexation request comes in from the applicant with no plan. So I still had questions that need to be answered, with a plan or without a plan. I just, because I may be a consenting instead of right now I'm considered non-consent. And I don't like that word non-consenting because I may might be better for me, but either way, there's just numerous questions I think we need to go at on this. So I would like to have this put back on hold a little bit until staff can do more clarification on the annexation part before we go. Because I know annexation after that, it's going to be probably a plan submitted and zoning change and all that. But I'm just talking about the annexation at this time. for the existing parties, because one of the comments, another thing too, when the applicant or when the city brought this to our attention, there was three choices to choose. We're in the second choice now, the annexation forceful. But there's also a plan A, which I liked at first, which was to annex the property that consenting parties wanted to, but not the non-consenting, which there's four parcels that are non-consenting at this time. So then if we would have done that initial request, then the developer could start his annexation, his zoning process, and his development. Because I don't want to slow that. I don't want to be in the way of slowing down any other party's development. But this forceful is confusing. Using this forceful annexation is confusing these these four parcels. I'm one of them. It's just we got answers. We got questions that we want answers. So that's the main thing. I would wish we could deny that request today. Maybe not all put it on hold or whichever. For some time, just so we can have some questions answered. I think that's a fair ask. And also you mentioned just now too, the drainage issue, the flooding drainage issue there. And yeah, I agree that the developer Ames does have very intense water retention on any development there, which is true. But I'm afraid that that's only going to do some of the, and it might not be fair to them to take some of this, because here's the drainage issue in that area is because the drainage system it can't go way fast enough. Remember a few years ago when Trinitas was going to develop that property south? They did an extensive study on that. More or less what I'm getting at is that drainage issue it's not big enough to take all the water away. So it backs up and gets in this property. For the last 20 years that I've lived there, you can see it's not the day of the rain, it's usually the day after the rain, because all the water is coming through the drainage, has nowhere to go, so it backs up. So that's, Trinitas was going to do a water retention on that side. So my point is we should address that. Drainage issue is always going to be an issue until we address that on the south side as well. And I'm just pointing that out is all. I'm not saying one way or another what needs to be done because I don't know, but I just want to point that out on that. So yeah, if you could please reconsider this, if we could go forward on the amendment today, but not the annexation part. Let's put that on hold for a little bit until the parties, and there's visitors too around the area, not visitors, I'm sorry, neighbors around the area too that are confused on all this. But mainly it's the non-consenting parties. But that's all I got for now. You got any questions for me?
I do not, no. Thank you. Thank you, Brant, for your comments. Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to make comments during the public hearing, this public hearing item? Are you seeing anyone else, Leanne, who's wanting to? Okay, seeing none, we will then close the public hearing. Any further discussion?
So just for clarification, Amelia, you said that the code requires that an annexation not create any islands.
That's
Correct?
state code.
How
And then
long has it been in the works? I'm sorry, how long has all this been?
gosh, I think we had the consultation meeting. Let me look at the staff report real quick. Sorry. Was that in April? The staff report here. Sorry about that. April 14th was the consultation meeting. So that, we received notice as the county prior to that of the proposed annexation. And then, the consultation meeting is where the supervisors are invited and staff and the township trustees just to talk through. So that's, about the time frame. I think this is an interesting request because, with this amendment, staff has essentially found and agrees that this area should be an urban service area. It makes sense for the surrounding development, to not have this, and I don't want to use the term island because I don't want to get us confused with the annexation, but to not have, this little pocket of rural urban transition area surrounded by urban service area. It makes sense to have that be urban service area. And with the amendment, once it is designated urban service area, prior to any development, that property has to be annexed. And so I don't know if delaying the annexation request would really be helpful because, it's essentially with an amendment, any development has to be annexed prior to, a rezoning or a subdivision. We'd still maintain jurisdiction over the current zoning district and any permitting requests that came through in the current zoning district. But if a zoning change was proposed, or if a subdivision plat came through and this is designated urban service area, that has to be annexed at that point. And the city reviews plans, how the site will develop. There's been talk of, will this have a manufactured housing community to the north? That'll be reviewed by the city under the city standards after annexation.
Amelia, could I kind of summarize what I'm thinking here? That what you're saying and what I'm seeing is that the question here for us is the land use appropriate? Not are the specific development plans everybody's preference?
Correct. And I'd go further to say, and given the land use change into urban service area, we also find that the annexation is appropriate at this point. And the city will review any plans after the annexation occurs.
Makes sense.
Okay. I'm ready to make a motion. There's no further discussion.
Okay.
Okay, I would move that we approve resolutions 21.88 and 21.89 for the staff recommendation.
And, oh, never mind, sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's
I'm
the
sorry.
next
Yep,
one.
that's the next one.
I checked.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Merkin,
Aye.
Basil,
Aye.
Evans, aye. Motion approved. Thank you, Amelia. Next, we are moving on to the first consideration of ordinance number 293, amending Chapter 80 floodplain management program of the Story County Land Development Regulations.
Thanks. Me again. So this request is essentially adopting language that the DNR has told us we need to adopt in our code. We participate in the Community Rating System program, which offers discounted flood insurance rates to communities that have adopted higher standards than would otherwise be required by the NFIP. And the Community Rating System has recently clarified how utility systems should be treated, including parts of utility systems like the lines that might go into the ground. And so this is really just a clarification in our code that, the panel boxes or the hot water heaters should be elevated or flood-proofed, and that the service lines themselves should also be flood-proofed or watertight. In the review of this, staff also found in previous amendments that we overlooked one area when we adopted an elevation requirement of 3 feet, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Leanne might be able to give you a better timeline on that one. But we found one definition that still had our previous elevation requirement in it, of 18 inches. So that's the other change. We're just bringing that definition into conformance with our current requirements as well. I did route this to Leanne, and she didn't have any concerns. And I did also send it to Ethan, and I've not heard back yet. But again, you know, this is recommended language from the DNR to comply with, you know, FEMA requirements, essentially. Go above the NFIP standards and continue to meet the requirements for us of the community rating system program. So it's not, you know, language that staff came up with. It's, you know, required for communities that are participating in this program. So we're recommending approval on first consideration and setting second consideration for next week.
Okay. Supervisors, any questions for Amelia? No? Okay, this is another public hearing item, so I will open the public hearing for first consideration of ordinance number 293. And if you'd like to make any comments, please raise your hand or click *9 to unmute yourself. And we'll wait a few seconds and go through to see if there's any comments for this. Leanne, seeing anything? I know sometimes some folks have had a hard time unmuting or getting the hand raised, so I want to make enough time. Nothing? Okay. We will close public hearing on first consideration of ordinance number 293. Any further discussion? Okay. Is there a motion?
I would move approval on first consideration of ordinance 293, amending chapter 80 floodplain management program, Story County Land Development Regulations.
And set second
And set second consideration
for May 18th.
for May 18th.
For May 18th. Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Basil?
Aye.
Merkin?
Aye.
Hens, aye. Great. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll move on to additional items. We have discussion and consideration of water damage repairs for the Human Services Center. Hello again, Joby.
Good morning again.
Morning.
This is for the Human Services Center in Ames. Back in February, we had a faulty sprinkler head decide to flood all 3 levels of the building. Most damage was done on the top level. It had about an inch of standing water through about 2/3 of the building. So 2 floors below it, most of the damage was ceiling tile and some sheetrock repairs. So largest cost item, we had ICAP send a insurance adjuster out. Total damage was $35,852.20. We have a $50,000 deductible, so no insurance reimbursement on it. A lot of the cleanup and sanitizing of the carpet that wasn't completely ruined, facilities management did in-house. So we're looking at carpet replacement in the multipurpose room, conference room east, fines recovery area, and then there's some scattered offices and storerooms that are right off the multipurpose room. All that carpet is the carpet tile. It ruined the adhesive underneath of it, so the tile are all coming up. So there's no saving the tile once they get that level of water saturation. And then quite a bit of ceiling tile on the main floor and lower level needs replaced. There's a section of wall cabinets above the copier and community services that was damaged beyond repair. They'll have to be replaced, and then some painting after all the drywall repairs were made. So looking at $23,500 to remedy all those problems. So that's what the request is for. Questions?
Thanks for all the work.
Yeah.
I'm glad you caught it when you did.
Yeah.
Did you find out anything more about the sprinkler?
Yeah, we ended up sending off 15 total sprinkler heads from the facility. Took some off every floor, had them tested by a underwriter's laboratory. It's something that's recommended after 20 years of service, and all of them passed. So it come down to, and I talked to 4 different sprinkler manufacturers about, have you seen this before? And all the answers I got were, not in my 30 years. I have never seen this before. You know, we looked at, you know, the sprinkler system has flow switches in it to alert when there's water flowing in it. But they're all designed for a certain level of flow, and this was like just a very slow stream. So the flow rate was low enough to where it didn't trigger any flow switches because it was below their threshold of designed operation. But we still had them all tested after it happened and reached out to other facilities with those types of sprinkler heads to see if they'd ever encountered it, because the recommended replacement date on that particular model of sprinkler head is after 50 years of service. They've been in service for 21 years. So bad luck is what it come down to.
Sounds like it. Well, thanks for doing that. And that gives us some comfort that it's not that it's a faulty sprinkler and it's not likely to happen.
Yeah, it's statistically, it shouldn't happen again.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have any other questions.
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Any motions?
Yes, we do.
I move approval of the unbudgeted expense 23,500 for water damage repairs for Human Services Center.
I would second.
Been moved and seconded. Merkin,
Aye.
Basil,
Aye.
Hens, aye. Thanks, Jody.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, good morning, Darren. We have discussion and consideration for Revitalize Iowa Sound Economy Program, or the RISE project.
Good morning. Yes, as you know, we got approved by the DOT for the RISE grant to pave 1 mile at 220th Street, and that also includes a bridge replacement. This is just the next step in the process. This is the agreement. Go ahead and sign. I will point out this does not yet commit us to anything until we actually let the project. So I'm comfortable going ahead and signing this agreement now. We've got some details to work out once we find out who is actually going to annex the property, the Verbio property. Nevada attempted to annex once already and it was turned down by the state, but they're attempting it again. I think they'll find out sometime in June if that is successful. If it is not, it could potentially turn into an Ames development. But we'll have to wait. Once we find that out, then we'll have to finalize some cost sharing agreements with the city who's going to pay for how much of the project. But until we let the project, we haven't committed ourselves to anything at this point. So with that, I would see if you have any questions, but I'd recommend we go ahead and approve this.
Supervisors, any questions?
I do have one question, Darren. This is Latifa. Am I remembering correctly that the DOT was recommending that maybe we apply for something other than the RISE?
Correct. That did happen. It's still a RISE grant, but they just kind of changed the category. They moved it to a development, local development. So what that did is it took away that job creation requirement, and it turned into more of a development site requirement. We just have to make sure the site's developed according to the RISE standards, and they felt the site that was proposed did meet those standards. So as long as that doesn't change drastically, we'll still be fine. And it did increase our funding a little bit to 50% of the total project costs gets paid by the RISE grant. So that's additional money.
Then if the city of Nevada is successful in its annexation, what would we expect that they would contribute?
Those are details we'll have to work out. And then also they'll have to commit to meeting those RISE development ground standards as well. So that'll all be worked into that agreement. But yeah, and I'd say we wait, find out first who annexes it, and then we'll work with them on those details.
Thank you.
And changing it to local development means that Verbio does not have to meet the the number of jobs created requirement, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, is there a motion?
I move approval of the Revitalize Iowa Sound Economy Program project agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Basil?
Aye.
Merkin?
Aye.
Hens, aye. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have consideration of an application for the City of Collins for $1,824 for the facade improvement grant program. I believe Leanne is going to. Direct it over there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The item before you, I don't think I think it's been a while since there's been a request for the facade grant improvement program. Just a quick recap of that program that's been in place for several years by the Board of Supervisors to encourage kind of some reinvestment in the downtowns of our smaller communities throughout Story County. The board annually budgets $10,000. And we've had a variety of different applications from communities throughout Story County. And there is funding available. This request is from the City of Collins. It's for 2 properties, but they're next to each other. They're both, it's the side of the community building on Long Main Street. And then the property next to it that has the band shell and the new structure on it. So it's 213, pardon me, and 219 Main Street. Again, adjoining properties. The request was submitted by the City of Collins and signed by the mayor. So this is a little bit unique because the city is also the owner and the applicant. Normally, you will see the business owner or property owner signing it. What I am going to suggest and recommend to the board, if you do take action to approve the request, you make it conditional upon receipt of a resolution from the Collins City Council in support of this application. So that we have the I's dotted and T's crossed. That's actually a change I'll be bringing to regulations or guidelines here in the foreseeable future too. So the total project costs for the improvements as noted are $9,120. The City of Collins is requesting $1,824, which does meet the guidelines of the project. The remainder of the cost would be matching in the form of, they have a grant that they have secured, and then local donations and lost funding from the city contribution. The application does go into detail, so I'm not going to go into that in addition to what I've shared. All the proposed requirements do meet the requirement, all the proposed improvements do meet the requirements. This is the first time we've seen one really for kind of landscaping and walkways. This building is sound, and there's a statement in the guidelines that buildings are constructually sound. These are some additional improvements that could be considered. Are there any questions for me?
Well, you just answered my one question with your last statement there, because when I saw the walkway and the landscaping, if that met the facade criteria. So
It's a little asterisk in the program guidelines.
By having a mayor or city, I think you said this is the first of its kind. Is this kind of are we setting a new precedent by doing this? Or is this always been a possibility, or always that they could have applied through this mechanism and it hasn't done in the past?
Well, Ziering has come through and as a property owner for the former bank building
Okay.
up there. But that property has all along been intended to be sold to different, this is intended to remain in city ownership and as a civic use. So what I intend to do in the future is come forward with some amendments to guidelines that does specify when properties are owned by municipalities or jurisdictions, and the intended long-term intended land use is to continue to be civic in nature, that there be some sort of a statement of support from the city council that does, obviously the mayor is a elected official representing the city, but then the city council then acknowledges the project as well. So kind of some checks and balances too.
Okay.
And that does ensure for the board of supervisors who is making investment in the community that there is full support from the community as well, which I know we do have here. They've budgeted for this, but I think it'd be a good thing to have for the record. And then again, I'll be bringing that change forward.
Sure. Any additional questions? Okay. A motion?
I would move that we accept the application and fund the city of Collins for $1,824 from the facade improvement grant program contingent upon receipt of a resolution from the Collins City Council supporting the application.
Second.
Okay, then moved and seconded. Any further discussion? No? Merkin?
Aye.
Basil?
Aye.
Hens, aye.
I'm trying to promote Lucy, the panelist.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm on the next agenda item.
Oh, okay. Oh, the tip. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's no departmental report, so we move on to discussion of prioritization of potential tax increment financing TIF revenues.
So when I drafted the memo, I didn't know Lisa was going to be gone. So Lucy's going to cover for Lisa Markley. My message to the board is pretty simple. I did share in the memo I drafted for the board a reiteration. I don't think reiteration is a word. We might make it a word. I've reiterated the prioritization that the board added to the economic development process and policies this spring. There were 4 bullet points added. Again, just for the benefit of those listening and just as a reminder, the economic development process and policies has a few statements that are relevant. The TIF funds are to be used to enhance taxpayers' enjoyment of the county and or to increase taxable valuation of lands in Story County, and with the goal of community improvement. So with those thoughts in mind, the board did amend to add the prioritization, looking at eligible projects through the county CIP, eligible county projects in lieu of increasing general obligation debt, eligible county projects that meet the goals of the strategic plan, and then lastly, really those that fall within the urban renewal area plan. So this first year with these revised prioritizations is going to be a little bit awkward. We're looking at fiscal year 23. We have already reached out to communities, had the first consultation meeting. That's a requirement. And those communities will be submitting applications by May 28th. So it's time that we have this discussion now. It will be occurring next year, early on to the budget process, so that when we reach out to the communities, we know how much is available potentially for fiscal year 24. Again, it's just the nature of the beast that's going to seem awkward. I did share that with communities too, that there may be funds available, there may not be funds available. And I didn't know what those amounts would be. So we want to get in front of the board though to give you an estimate of what projected TIF revenues may be. And then you have taken action on like a request with the city of Nevada for the field house project, but it's not called the field house project. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to call it. I can't remember it. But so whether or not you did not decide on the revenue source for that. So there are some other things hanging out there that could impact then later this summer as we make decisions on requests from the communities. Do you have any questions on that before I hand it over to Lucy to go over the projected revenues?
I don't.
So really today is just for a discussion so that we can begin to prepare as staff as we receive the applications and bring it back for some guidance decision from the board later this spring and summer.
Okay.
Lucy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
She needs to unmute.
Okay. All right. You should have the projected TIF revenue that we have showing FY23 and beyond. This is our best estimate at this time. These numbers will be refined again this fall when we have actuals from the current fiscal year. They plus the consolidated levies going into FY23. Usually you don't see a dramatic shift in these numbers, but you will see a change. That's about it. We do have projected steady income for the next 5 years. So if you are anticipating doing something over multiple years, or supporting some additional debt service levy with that TIF bonds, then that is a possibility. So, and that is like the 50% that you do limit yourself to, which is a choice which is an internal policy choice. So.
And so to follow up on that, and I make no guarantees on my math right now, but there's roughly just shy of $6 million in projects in the capital improvements plan for fiscal year 23 that indicate that the general fund will be some source of funding. It may be 100% general, proposed to be 100% general fund, or a portion thereof. That's broken down conservation. Again, keep in mind, quick math, but $1.48 million facilities management, and that really does include larger projects such as the outbuilding storage at the Justice Center, the infill project at this building, Justice Center climate controlled storage building at 1.9 million. So what we label under facilities management are over $4 million. And then the sheriff's office has a couple projects that are about $253,000. So even that nearly $6 million, if you go to goal 1, it's not really going to cover that amount, but it's at least something to begin the discussion for prioritization. And again, fiscal year, we're looking now out past to fiscal year 23. And so those projects in the CIP will be reviewed starting this fall and looked at in earnest in December and January. So really, again, today is just to get some guidance and feedback from the board. And I can share it with jurisdictions that this next upcoming fiscal year, not this next one, and those decisions for the projects are made this fall because we have to certify debt by December 1st to the auditor's office. The board is anticipating funds will be available, or the board is anticipating funds will not be available. And then I can communicate that to them so that they know to submit something or not to. And we may not know either. And I, as I said earlier, it's going to be awkward this year. There's really not a way around it other than just take a complete break from projects, which we did not discuss. Are there questions for me?
What's the usual timeframes on the URA projects? You said the communities will submit applications by May 28th, and that's for FY '23.
Right,
When do we normally,
that's normal.
okay, but the next deadlines, when do we normally decide on that?
Oh, I see what you mean. So roughly, I don't have the time frame
Sure,
memorized,
that's
but
fine.
I think in mid-August, the presentations will be before the Board of Supervisors. The applicants that submitted presentations always come, so you have an opportunity to ask them questions. And then I think it's early October to mid-October is when the urban renewal area plan will be adopted or amended by resolution. And that action of adopting a resolution does say, in essence, say we approve these projects. And then I send notice to them, and then next July of 23, July of 20, I'm off on years, July of 22, then they can start doing that project.
Because that'll be fiscal year 23.
Yeah.
Calendar year 22 is what you're working.
And then again, when does Jeff Deck have to be certified?
December 1st.
Okay, I see.
And that's where it gets really kind of confusing because we're approving projects in one fiscal year and a calendar year, throw that in as well. And then they're not eligible for the reimbursement until the following July. So, 6-7 months later after, sometimes up to 10 months later after approval by the Board of Supervisors for the project.
So you're not asking us, so how I'm taking this here is, do we want to move forward with this? If we say, yes, we do, but we don't have, do you need a dollar amount now, or can we make that determination later to say, yes, we want to fund something for communities, but we haven't decided yet as to what our financial threshold will be, because May 28th is a couple weeks away.
It is. And I don't know if you're prepared to have that discussion on dollar amount today. Like I said, I wanted to kick off this discussion. Ideally, I would be able to say to communities, we have $80,000. Just point that has no relevancy to this. But as Lucy said, these are just estimates of projected revenues, and the communities are well aware. They know that going into this each year, the funding may or may not be available. I've been able to give them the generally like $160,000, 20-some thousand. This year I didn't even do that just because you've added this new prioritization. And I did emphasize that to them, that funds may not be available this year because of this change in the process. And I think everyone was very understanding of that change. I haven't had anyone reach out to me and say we're going to submit. I know Nick was on the call. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's had any conversations with anyone.
Remind me of the commitment on the Native Field House.
I think that was 400,000, but we
$400,000.
also had an Ames request, and I know they want to be put back on the agenda as well.
Yeah, the Nevada one was going to, they didn't necessarily need it over all in 1 year. Right?
Correct.
Do you remember what exactly they said? I don't really have much of a sense.
I think that was yet to be determined, if I'm recalling correctly. We could bump Nick up and he might recall, but I thought that was still to negotiate as to, I thought it was going to be over a few years.
I thought it was 3, but maybe.
I think that's right. I think it's over 3 years. I'd have to look back at our minutes to remember accurately.
For which one?
For Nevada, I think it was 400,000 over 3
I
years.
thought it was 3 years.
But we don't remember when it would start. Now it's going to push on the aquatic center. What's that ask?
That was $1 million. that was their initial, or what we put on there. I know they had some additional requests, yeah, that they were requested, but that wasn't the specific on the agenda item at that particular time.
Okay. So, yeah, it does seem like there's, so we're balancing the one asker said yes to, another one that's coming back to us. What in our CIP is doable, and that's actually our first priority is the CIP, according to what we've done. And then the other community, okay. It seems like we need to start off with the CIP and going, kind of diving into that again. That's our starting point. I don't think we want to, you know, pull the URA, but as Leanne said, communities know it's not a given that we're going to have money there. We might want to elongate the process, say we may not, just to communicate, maybe already have, that we may not follow. It may be longer before we actually know whether we're going to have money for this project. It may be, you know, after December 1st.
Well,
No,
then
we're
you
gonna
can't-
certify by
Next
December
year.
1st.
Yeah,
then we're not getting a year.
that December 1st has to be, that has to be ultimate
Oh, gosh.
deadline to amend
Yes,
urban
I'm
renewal
sorry.
area.
Right.
Okay,
It's the,
I mean, yeah.
I think the question is, I know your time frame, but if you've got a May 28th time frame, can we shift that a little bit?
And we did, last year was the example of being flexible with that program. And I don't know that I would hurt any of their feelings if I said, we're gonna push that back a month. And I built in buffers for that flexibility. And I would be, I can easily communicate that to those that attended the initial meeting. Those are the only eligible applicants. And I don't think shifting that deadline would have impacted who attended that meeting, because they didn't even know that information yet at that point. So I can communicate that back. What I would do is send out an email, if that is really what I come from this meeting with today, to share that with them. But then I would formalize that on the consent agenda next week with the policies, because the policies clearly lay out the process and the timeframes. But there definitely is room. I added a little bit more on the tail end this time for some spreading out of presentations, knowing that last year we had to be flexible, and I learned a lesson that we could do it then.
some of the things you mentioned in CIP, really, they've been there a while, and they may be changed because of the space needs study. And do you have an idea from Joby when they're looking at having that done?
Alyssa, do you know when the space needs study will be done?
Thinking I should remember, but I'm not.
I don't remember either.
I asked, I have it written down in my office, if you guys want to know.
Yeah, 3 of the projects for facilities management for fiscal year 23 are tied directly to
The infill, the storage.
and then the storage building, the climate controlled storage building, and then there's Justice Center storage too.
Okay, so two, yeah, it's basically all in for storage, it's just different places. So I think as soon as that, we have the spacing study, and get a chance to digest that, and Joby has, we can come back and look at the CIP. And maybe those asks can be maybe revised, and then we start there, since that's our first priority. What were the other things in the CIP? Was that had general funds listed as one of the sources of revenue. There were some other
A couple of them had IDNR, such as the McFarland Lake Restoration Project. That was a portion general fund. Same with the Oriole Ridge Lodge restroom. Some have Dakota Access Pipeline funds. That's not the right title for that, but yeah, DAPL funds. But it was Hannum's Mill.
PGP.
Yeah. Hannum's Mill, Hickory Grove Park Road resurfacing, McFarland Lake Restoration, Oriole Ridge Lodge restroom, Skunk River Flats addition, and the shelter and gathering space at West Peterson Park.
So maybe it's a matter of communicating to Joby and to Mike and just saying, when will you have more definite, where the money is coming from, what amounts from what source of funds, so we can determine, where we're working with our first priority in the CIP. I think that's the first step.
Yeah, and I mean,
A deeper dive in those.
that decision by the board and the communication from both the city of Ames and the city of Nevada in the form of the requests before we even started the amendments to this makes this even more awkward. So I think we've not really asked through the capital improvements planning process, the definitive or more concrete estimates the further out we go. These definitely are going to be guesstimates for fiscal year 23. For fiscal year 22, there's a greater degree of assurance. So there's a little bit of a paradigm shift for how I communicate to those putting together their request for the CIP too, that we do need more information at this point. And that's not been communicated out yet because we haven't started that process. I think there might be a shift of all of our different procedures too. But so I'm hearing the board is maybe delay that deadline, and I can look at the calendar and find a date that's logical. Not necessarily May 20 or not like 2 weeks later, maybe look out 30 days. And I can communicate that if the board's okay with those eligible applicants. And then I'll have something on next week's consent agenda, just formalizing that, the revisions in those dates. And then come forth another time, or would you want to do like a work session format or to discuss prioritization, or how would you like to handle that?
I think we can do it at a board meeting. I mean, it's only 11:30 now, and this is for one of our longer ones. I think
Right.
that time to fold it into a board meeting.
Yeah, I think we probably could too.
Okay. I will try to get some information from like Joby and Mike and some additional what they have, deadlines for space needs study, and then I don't know if I can be back next week or not with that information. It might be a couple weeks. Okay. So, any other questions, guidance for me?
I don't have any other questions. Did you get enough from us?
Yes.
Okay.
Like I said, this it's a dipping our toes in a new way of doing things, which I think is a great approach. And I do have now some estimates I can share with those eligible applicants too, and let them be aware that the board has already approved $400,000 for City of Nevada, and just communicate this discussion with them too. I'm sure no one else is.
All right. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go on to upcoming agenda items. One thing I do know that will be coming on an agenda item, we had the tabbing ordinance before, and then the Board of Health met. I believe that they'll be coming forth with some options or some directions for the environmental health as to how to draft the ordinance, or if we want to even have an ordinance. I believe that will be on next week's agenda.
Okay. I wonder if Stephanie could put all those documents we received on the S drive, because they took up a whole lot of room in email. and I didn't necessarily want to put them on my hard drive, so.
I will ask her.
Yeah, I would like to, look. I scanned them before I deleted them, but I'd like to look at them again before that discussion. If you don't mind, that'd be
Yep,
great.
no, I'll ask her. She may have already done that, but I will double check with
There
her.
is.
So, okay, next we'll move on, public forum number 2. This is time for public, or for comments on items not on today's agenda. The board may not take any action on comments due to requirements of the open meeting law, may do so in the future. Is there any comments? And it looks like there is a hand up for Brant Lemire.
Hello, Brant Lemire again, 5615 Lincoln Way, Ames, Iowa. I just wanted to comment or answer to a comment, I guess, after I spoke earlier, just to clear up that island. We spent a lot of talk on an island on them properties. Out of the 4 parcels I mentioned, there is only one island, if you will, on the applicant's proposition. That is only a ½ acre. The other 3 parcels of remaining a little over 5 acres, I believe, that is not an island. To the south is still county property. And the reason I bring this up is because of what Amelia mentioned, a possible plan of the applicant's plan of they haven't had any commercial frontage plan, only the mobile home park she mentioned, the RLP or the residential plan. And I concentrate that towards the north off Lincoln Way, if you will, north of the back of that 40-acre property. So my position is that, you know, that there's no mention of a plan in the frontage, there's still no island, if you will, on the frontage property that the land use plan, the urban fringe plan, and the earlier or the new 2040 plan that we're talking of. They always have commercial frontage here. So I just wanted to bring that up here on the end here, just, you know, I didn't know if there was any confusion on this, but I just wanted to relay that to clear up any confusion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Brant. Any additional comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment time. And we'll move on to liaison assignments, committee meeting updates and announcements from supervisors.
Let's see, there's another NACO call evidently this afternoon regarding treasury regulations that I just found earlier. So I'm going to try to attend that.
Is that the 5:45 one? I think it's 6:45 Eastern Standard Time. Is it that
That was
one?
yesterday. No, this one's at 2 o'clock Eastern time.
1 o'clock today?
Okay,
So
because
1
I haven't
o'clock
seen that
Friday.
one, so, okay. I will
Yeah,
try
it
to,
just came in this morning, so you might want to check that. Also, events conference board tonight. I am going to Jewel at 7 o'clock tonight to talk to the city council there about possibly joining the Headwaters WMA. And tomorrow, it looks like we've got a drainage meeting. Yep.
Mhm.
And also the watershed assessment work group meets tomorrow. And 911 board meets tomorrow night. Island's opening. Island restaurant opening in Colo was on Friday. That'll be nice. And I think that there are a couple other things maybe, but I think that's about it. So several meetings coming up.
Yep, a lot of those same meetings. And I have SCAN and DCAT both on Friday afternoon, and we've got the NACO Leadership Academy again. And Monday, I've got alternatives statewide coordinators meeting and a Boost special meeting. That's it.
and I have basically your same meetings in there. I do have on my agenda to call in to annexation call tomorrow. Thursday, I have a workforce development meeting that begins at 7:30 in the morning. And then, as we said, our NACO meetings as well. So busy. We're all busy. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Merkin,
Aye.
Basil,
Aye.
Hens, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.